Okay, so guys, we finished off talking about Samson, I believe. So he was the last judge, and one of the things that I kind of realized or learned in studying through Judges this time was that the judges get worse as the story goes on. And so Samson is the last one. So he's, there are lots of judges that have problems, but he has a lot of moral issues. He's led around by sexual sin. He keeps going back. I remember asking my dad as a kid, Delilah tries to trick him to reveal, why is it that he's strong a couple of times and tries to trap him and give him over to the Philistines. And I was like, why does he keep going back if she's plotted to kill him? Well, it's because he's stupid. Because that's what sin does. Is sin makes us stupid, and particularly sexual sin or addictive sin, and it enslaves us to going back to situations that will destroy us, and that's what happened to Samson. So he is able to give him victory over the Philistines. He pushes down the pillars after they've captured him and kills them all, and gives the land 20 years of rest. Okay, but they're under 40 years of slavery, right? So, and then that's the last judge that we hear about in the book of Judges. But we're going to see in this, what I call the Bad Bethlehem Trilogy, just a second, Patrick, we're going to see the evil of the people of Israel, and we're going to see the evil of the leadership, the priests, and so and their moral failings as well. Okay, Patrick, you had a question?
So who took over Israel after the 20 years?
Nobody. I mean, they went back to being run, within their own tribes. Mm-hmm. So, and that's actually an important point. Israel's not a nation in the sense that they are a bunch of scattered tribes yet. There's nothing uniting them yet, other than maybe like common language, common history, the law of Moses, stuff like this. But they're very, scattered right now. And so they have a temporary period of rest, but there's not a unification until David. And, somewhat with Saul, but more really with David, that kind of brings the nation together. And then the nation splits under Solomon. So anyway, we'll get there, but let's, Timmy, yeah.
Can I just go that?
Yeah, just go that way. Let's talk about the Bad Bethlehem Trilogy. Now, not all these bad events take place in Bethlehem, but all the stories involve kind of the region of Bethlehem, or people leave Bethlehem and something bad happens. Okay, so we'll talk about that in just a second. And then what we discussed the other day, these are some of probably the darkest, most disturbing places in Scripture that show really the depths of sin and show what the consequences are of everybody doing what's right in their own eyes. And we basically see that Israel is at the point where they are so corrupt that they're basically just like Sodom and Gomorrah. And so, and you know what God did to Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19. That's the judgment Israel deserves, is the point. And then, so you get two bad stories with Bethlehem, like a Levite will leave Bethlehem and then go nearby into the city of Jebus, which will later be Jerusalem. And, these different things will happen. And then there's one good Bethlehem story that kind of brings it back, brings some hope. And we'll look into that hopefully this week, maybe tomorrow go over this. Okay, so episode 1 of this trilogy, because it's kind of funny, like we sing that like Christmas song, the little town of Bethlehem, right? Well, Bethlehem gets mentioned a couple times strategically in the Bible. Okay, so the first one is Judges 17 and 18. This man, Micah, forms an idol. Okay, he makes an idol for himself out of gold. And at some point he does say that he's worshiping God through the idol, but he's mixing worship of God with pagan practices, and what commandment is he breaking? Yeah.
Commandment 2, bear false witness.
No, not, well, commandment 2, but not
make idols.
Not to make graven images, yeah. So not to try to represent God by his creation, and mixing God's worship with other things. So this is against the law, okay? Now, who is the priestly tribe? Who is the priestly family? Yeah.
The Levites.
Levites, okay. So remember, the Levites are supposed to be the ones who are leading worship. They're the ones who are allowed to be priests, okay? Now, the Levites, you would expect them to have the higher moral standard, to know the law of God, to keep true worship, to lead the people in that. But the Levites, we're going to see in most cases, are just as bad, okay? So this guy Micah makes a idol for himself and creates kind of a private temple. And he says to his son, you're going to be a priest in my temple for this idol. Okay, so it's a don't think big temple, think like a tent. Okay. Now, there's this Levite, okay, so of the priestly family, should be the one leading in true worship. And Micah meets him. This guy travels out of Bethlehem, and this guy meets Micah, and he says Micah says to the Levite, you know what? You should be, actually, since you're of the priestly family, if I have you on my side, that would be awesome. For having my own private temple with this idol in it, that would be even better. And you could, then God will give me whatever I want, because basically you're the one that is of the priestly family. So he has him, be the administrator of his private temple, which he's not supposed to have. Yeah.
Can I please go to the right?
Yeah, that's fine. Patrick, you had a question?
So the Levite is from Bethlehem, or the story is happening in Bethlehem?
Yes, he leaves from Bethlehem and visits and meets Micah. Abigail?
Sorry, this is a little bit off topic. So we just got the Judges Sin Cycle thing that you posted on Google Classroom.
Yeah.
But then a couple days ago, there's this history thing that got posted, and I don't think that was for us.
Oh, yeah, that was for another class. That was just a mistake.
So we just ignore that?
Just ignore that.
Okay.
I'll delete it. Yeah.
And so is the Bethlehem in the territory of the Levites?
No, the Levites don't have a territory. This guy just lived. The Levites would have houses and stuff, but they don't have a set land, so they would live in different areas throughout the land.
So which tribe owns Bethlehem?
Judah. So yes, so Judah, Bethlehem is within that. So that makes sense. David and Jesus, the kingly tribes, are born from there. Okay, so he travels, so this Levite, you would think he would say, no, you're not supposed to worship God like this, but he actually joins this guy, gets paid to do this. So it shows you the priesthood is not good, the people are not good, like Micah. And then this group called this private army of the tribe of Dan, the Danites, show up with their, tools of war, and they show up and they take Micah's idol. And Micah follows them, and he's mad that they took his idol, but they're like, well, if you want to fight us, you're welcome to try. And so Micah goes home, okay? Then they go to the city of Laish, okay? And this private army basically destroys the city, burns it to the ground, kills everybody, okay? So you can see, there's all this violence, corruption, sin, false worship going on, and this is all happening, kind of near the Levite that come out of the area of Bethlehem, and the Levite goes with these guys as well. So, hey, gentlemen, let's pay attention, please. So the Levite goes with these guys and participates in that, or at least oversees what's going on there. Okay, now number 2, this is where Judges ends. Okay, it ends in a civil war, which is going to take place a couple of times throughout Israel's history. But basically, Judges ends with Israel's version of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, and I told you guys about these chapters a little bit. But there's this Levite who leaves Bethlehem, okay? And this Levite is living with a concubine, okay? Now, a concubine in that time, okay, is it's more than a prostitute, but it is less than a wife. And what I mean is, this is not somebody he's married to. This is not a biblical relationship in the sense that God desires or honors this. However, the Bible does sometimes deal with, there are other wives and concubines, okay? So what this guy does is his concubine, ladies, pay attention. His concubine runs away from him, goes back to her father's house. So he tries to go find her, sweet talk her, and talk her into coming back with him. And so he stays with the father for a couple days, and his concubine agrees to go back with him. And they go back to this nearby Bethlehem, to this city called, at that time, Jebus, Jebus. Later, Jebus will be called Jerusalem. Okay, that's when it gets taken over by David. Okay, so he goes with them, and they stop at somebody's house, and he brings them in, and this guy and his daughter are there, and they have dinner with this guy. Okay, and let me just go ahead to Judges 19 and talk about just read you what happens here. So look at Judges 19, verse 22. Okay, it says, while they were celebrating, so this is while they're having dinner and stuff, while they were celebrating, behold, the men of the city, certain worthless fellows, surrounded the house, pounding on the door, and they spoke to the owner of the house, the old man, saying, bring out the man who came into your house, that we may have relations with him. Okay, so they're demanding this guy to send out this guy who came to the town because they want to commit homosexual rape against this Levite. Okay, and then so he says, the man, the owner of the house, listen to how he deals with this. The man, the owner of the house, went out to them and said, no, my fellows, please do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not commit this act of folly. Okay, this should sound, so far, if you know your Bible a little bit, this should sound exactly, almost word for word, like another biblical narrative earlier that's happened before. What does it sound like? Yeah.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah. The two angels in human form go to Lot's house to bring him out. Having dinner, they say, we'll spend the night in the square. Lot says no. The whole city surrounds Lot's house. Lot says to them the same thing. Do not do wickedly. Then Lot's solution, okay, do you guys remember what Lot's solution was? Genesis 19? Yeah.
Send his daughter out.
He's like, here, I'll throw my daughters out, and you can have them. Okay? Now listen to what this guy does. Judges 19, verse 24. Here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. Please let me bring them out to you, that you may ravish them and do to them whatever you wish, but do not commit this act of folly against this man. He's like, well, God may kill me if I let this Levite out there, who's a priest of God. So he comes up with, I'll throw my virgin daughter out there and his concubine, and you can rape them. So this shows you how bad the situation is here. And so listen to what happens just going on with this. But the men would not listen to him. So the men seized his concubine. So the man seized his concubine and brought her out to them. And they raped her and abused her all night until morning. Then they let her go at the approach of dawn. Okay, so I mean, this is major sin, gang rape, huge crime here that's worthy, according to the law of God, of death. It says, as the day began to dawn, the woman came and fell down at the doorway of the house where her master was until full daylight. When her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, then behold, his concubine was laying in the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, get up and let us go. But there was no answer. Then he placed her on his donkey, and the man arose and went to his home. Okay, so she's dead, okay, after this major, just disturbing act of sin. And so this basically shows us that Israel at this time, even this is going to be the capital city, this is going to later be Jerusalem. Israel during this time is basically as bad as what? What's the comparable event?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
They're basically like Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah. Israel is not a holy nation. They're not a kingdom of priests. They have basically devolved to the point where they are Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? And so this has affected all levels. The judges are bad. The priests are bad. The people are bad. Okay? So the period of Judges is probably the worst time in Israel's history. So this Levite wants to send a message to all the tribes to come and make war against the people who did this. Okay? So how he sends his message is like this. Look at Judges 19:29. It says, when he entered his house, he took a knife and laid hold of his concubine, so her dead body, and cut her in 12 pieces, limb by limb. Okay? Why does he cut her into 12 pieces? Timmy?
Because of the 12 tribes.
Okay. He's going to send them to the 12 tribes. Brandon, is that what you were going to say? Yep. And that's what he says. And sent her throughout the territory of Israel. Okay, so he probably attached a message, a letter with each of the pieces and mailed it out and said, this is what happened. Here's proof. Here's part of the body. And so verse 30 says, all who saw it said, nothing like this has ever happened or been since the day when the sons of Israel came out of the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it and take counsel and speak up. Okay? So in other words, we're as bad as Sodom and Gomorrah now. We've never heard of any sin. There's been a lot of sin committed along the way, but nothing this graphic. Okay? And so basically they got the group of people together. They all sent in various armies. Armies isn't the right way to think about it. More like militias. Just whoever's fighting, they're not matching uniforms. They're not, skilled soldiers necessarily. It's just each tribe sends in their fighting men to go fight with this tribe that committed this act. And so they fight a civil war in chapter 20. Benjamin, the tribe, is defeated. Okay, so they mourn over the last tribe. Okay, now let me just read two verses that you guys already know. Judges 19:1. It says, "Now it came about in those days when there was no king in Israel that a certain..." and so it talks about, again, no king. Okay, and everybody is doing what's right in their own eyes. And I believe that's in 19 as well. And then listen to how Judges, the book, ends. Okay. It ends with, the sons of Israel departed from there at that time, and every man to his tribe and family, each two of them went to their own inheritance. It's Judges 21:24. Now listen to verse 25, the last verse of the book. It says, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." Okay, so that's where the book ends. Okay, so we've had story that involves Bethlehem. One, bad, idolatry, mass murder, at all levels of society. Episode 2, Israel's version of Sodom and Gomorrah, affecting, again, all levels of society, the people, the priests, the leadership. The whole book ends in a civil war and says there's no king in Israel. That everyone just does whatever they decide is right. They're not listening to God. The judges cannot provide them full rest. And it's not just... Judges ends this way because the problem is not just Israel has external enemies. What's Israel's real problem? Besides having external enemies that oppress them, yeah.
They don't care about God at all.
Yeah, they're internally corrupt. Their problem is on the inside, right? Their own sin is the problem, not just that the Philistines come and get them sometimes. That's a problem as well. But they're so corrupt that that they're not honoring God. They've totally forgotten God. Everybody doesn't care what God says. They do what's right in their own eyes. Okay, now, this is all dark, but the third event in the Bethlehem trilogy is what? You guys know or can infer, or we may have said this last week. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Third movement is the book of Ruth. Okay, that takes place during the time of Judges. Okay, so Ruth will have some good things that happen in Bethlehem, contrasted against this. Okay, so why is the book of, well, let me read Ruth 1:1, where it says, "Now it came about in the days when the judges governed, that there was a famine in the land." Okay, we know famines happen in the world, but according to Deuteronomy, why would there be a famine in the land? Where does the famine come from? Or why is it happening? Yeah.
The people sin.
The people sin, and the law says what will happen to them. If they disobey, they get what?
Oh, blessings.
No,
Sorry.
curses. Yep. But if they obey, they get blessings, right? So a famine in the land shows God's cursing the land, right? Now listen to the rest of Ruth 1:1. It says, "And a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons." So there's, again, this guy from Bethlehem, and he's leaving Bethlehem, just like the Levites in Judges 17-18, and the Levite in Judges 19 through 21. Now he's not showing trust in the Lord. He's leaving the land, okay, to go and live amongst the Moabites, okay. But that's where his one of his sons marries Ruth, right? Then the 2 sons both die, right? And so we'll get into Ruth in a little bit. But why is the book of Ruth not just important, but necessary? What is the book of Ruth transitioning us to, and what is it for? What is it? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but wasn't Ruth technically kind of like a Gentile? Like she accepted Christianity? Yeah,
she turned to the Lord, right, and was saved, turned to the God of Israel, and goes and lives in the land. So yeah, that's important. But what else is? So we're going from the period. Remember, they said there's no king. We're in the period of the Judges. How does Ruth help us transition from the period of Judges to the period of the Kings that will come about in 1st and 2nd Samuel?
It gives us hope.
Yes, it does, but how does it give us hope? Because it's not just a nice story. Ruth plays a key role in basically making a connecting point to the Kings. Yeah.
The son of David, the king of David, the king of David will come from the line of Ruth.
Right. So Ruth marries Boaz, and then their great-grandson will be David. Just look ahead to Ruth 4:22. The last word of the book, the verse, Ruth 4:22 says, "And to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse David." Okay, so why Ruth is important, okay, is Ruth gives us this bridge, okay, from Judges to the period of the Kings, okay, and it also ends with the line who is going to be the true kingly line of David, okay, and then so David now, Samuel, if you wrote the book of Ruth, is showing us, okay, we've moved from the period of Judges, now God is bringing the period of the Kings. Here is the line of the right king. So from Judah forward, he gets to David, okay? And then David's the one who gets the covenant from God, and all the kings will be in his line. ultimately pointing to who? Who? Jesus, yeah. Yeah, so Ruth helps us get to the right King David, but it also plays a key role in establishing that Jesus is the Messiah. Okay, and we'll talk about this later. But let me talk about also kind of why Bethlehem's important. Okay, so we know David will be from Bethlehem. Okay, but after David, and David sets up the kingdom. He centralizes the kingdom at Jerusalem. Where are all the other kings born? Where are all the other kings born after David? Not in Bethlehem, but where? It's more important, well, not more important city, but more noteworthy city. Where's the capital of Israel? Yeah. Jerusalem. Yeah, all other kings are born in Jerusalem. David is born in Bethlehem because he's taken from here as the beginning. Okay, this is where you have a connection. Hundreds of years later, you have the prophet Micah. Okay, this is after David's long dead. Okay, this is around the 700s. Okay, BC, so 700 years before Christ. Okay, so Micah basically says Israel has totally failed in its role, and they're going to go get kicked out of the land and go into exile. And Israel has basically failed because of the kings. Okay, the people are bad, the priests are bad, but he says ultimately it's the leadership's problem. The leadership have failed. Okay, so he says basically what needs to happen is God needs to start the whole process over. Okay, and so he's going to start the whole process over, and then that's where we get Micah 5:2-4. Start the process over. So if he wants to start with the new David, where does the Messiah have to be born?
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem. Why? Because who was born there? David, yep. The fact that Jesus is born in Bethlehem means we're starting the whole thing over. Except, Jesus will do it right. So can somebody read Micah 5:2-4? This is a good Christmas verse, Christmas prophecy fulfilled in Christ. Yeah, those minor prophets are a little smaller and a little harder to locate.
Micah 5.
Yes.
Okay, Micah 5:2-4.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Therefore he shall give them up until the time when she who is in labor has given birth. And the rest of the brothers shall return to the people of Israel. And he shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall dwell secure, for now he shall be great to the end of the earth.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so it says the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, but not just Bethlehem. They actually, Micah gets a little bit more precise and calls it Bethlehem Ephratah or Ephrathah, okay? Which means it's not just, you guys know your zip code, okay? Do you know there's another 4 digits you can add onto your zip code to make it more precise?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you can know your own zip code, but you can also say my zip code's not just this area, but it's this like little 4 digits you can add on. Sometimes you'll see it on like an Amazon package, okay? That's what this is doing. It's not just in the city of Bethlehem, it's in this little region of Bethlehem, okay? So this gets fulfilled in Christ because he's born in Bethlehem. Also, interestingly, Micah 5:2 and 5:4 talks about the Messiah, his going forths are from eternity. Okay, so it's talking about he's divine, he's God. Okay, and then the last thing I want to take a look at this morning is just scroll ahead in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 1, showing you how Old Testament background makes sense of passages in the New Testament that we would tend to kind of skip over, but it makes sense if you understand, the names and the history. Okay, look at Matthew 1:1. It says, the record of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, son of David, son of Abraham. Okay, now pause there for a second. Where do we hear, it's not said this way, the record of the genealogy, but where do we hear a couple times in one book, this is the book of the generations of? This is going way back. Do you guys remember talking about this? What book keeps repeating at new sections, this is the book of the generations of, and then starts a new kind of topic?
Genesis.
Genesis? Okay, yeah. What's that? Yeah, it goes through Genesis. This is the book of the generations of Adam. This is the book of the generations of Noah. This is the book of the generations of Abraham. This is the book of the generations of Isaac. This is the book of the generations of Jacob. Okay, and then it has Jacob's 12 sons. Right now, it says this is the book of the generations of Jesus the Messiah. Okay, so it's picking up where the Old Testament has been following this line all the way through. And then who are the key individuals that Matthew is identifying Jesus with in Matthew 1:1? Who are the two names that are mentioned there, Old Testament names? Jesus is the son of these two people, descendant of these two people. You can look, Matthew 1:1. Yeah, there we go.
David and Abraham.
Yeah, son of David, okay, he's the king, the Messiah, and then he's the son of Abraham. He can fulfill the Abrahamic covenant. And now, listen, normally you'd skip over this, or you'd read it, quickly without paying attention, but now we kind of have a little bit more of the background here. Listen to Matthew 1 through 5, or I'll start in verse 2. It says, Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Okay, Perez was the father of Hezron, and Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon was the father of Boaz by Rahab. Okay, so remember we talked about a lot of these people, not every name, but remember talking about Rahab and Joshua. And then Boaz is the father of Obed by Ruth. Okay, so now we're in the book of Ruth. That's why it's important here. And Obed is the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of David the king. Okay, if you know Old Testament Survey 1, verses 1 through 5, really the first verses of the New Testament, makes sense because it's proving that Jesus is the right guy. He's the Messiah. That it has a genealogy that goes back all the way to the beginning, that he has the legal right to be the king. Okay, so the names, if you don't know Old Testament biblical background, it's like, well, who are all these people? But if you know the names, you can kind of see that Matthew's tying together the history. Yeah?
Can I go to the bathroom?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we'll get into Old Testament Survey 2, where that will cover, Solomon and forward, but basically you kind of see through this that understanding this stuff helps you get the the New Testament. Okay, so we'll get to Ruth tomorrow. Okay, we'll give you guys a little time today to work on those questions on Judges. Those will be due on Friday night. Okay, but they should be fairly simple from what we've just talked about over last week and this morning. So we'll